Hare Krishna.
Reading from Srila Prabhupada's Lilamrita. Continuing the chapter. Chant Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada recalled how, as early as 1969, when his temple in Los Angeles had purchased a few cars and the number of devotees had begun increasing, the neighbors had become envious. Prabhupada said that he had invited them to also come and live in the Krishna conscious community, but that their reply had always been no. Prabhupada said that the more the opposition created turmoil, the more Krishna consciousness would become famous. He also reasoned that people were reacting to his very strong preaching. I condemn everyone, he said, that they are all dogs and hogs. And the United Nations I call a pack of barking dogs. It's a fact. And in Chicago I said, all women, you cannot have freedom. So I became a subject of great criticism. Srila Prabhupada concluded his meeting with Rameshwar by saying that the devotees should be very alert and intelligently defend the Krishna conscious movement. But they should also understand that a higher principle was operating. This opposition indicated the genuineness of ISKCON. Even Krishna himself was sometimes the center of calamitous activities, such as when he fought with Kaliya and other enemies, or when, as an infant, he fell into the Jamuna River. This is the beauty of Vrindavan, said Prabhupada. When Krishna entered the Jamuna to fight with Kaliya, it was not at all good news for Mother Yashoda, Nanda, the friends and family. Not at all. Their life was lost. But still Krishna was the center. This is Vrindavan. And everything Krishna is the center. So our situation is just like that. They are making bad propaganda against Krishna. This is the opposition. But I am happy that Krishna is the center, that's all. This is the beauty of this movement. Although we are put into some difficulty, yet the center is Krishna. Srila Prabhupada wanted to travel with a group of his disciples by train to Allahabad. But when a devotee went to buy tickets, he discovered that all the seats had long been purchased. There was no chance of making reservations for Allahabad so close to Kumbh Mela. One of Srila Prabhupada's Bombay friends, however, a Mr. Gupta, held a high position with the Central Railway of India, and at Prabhupada's request arranged for a special private car on a train to Allahabad, exclusively for Prabhupada and his disciples. Early on the morning of January 11th, Srila Prabhupada embarked on a 24-hour-plus train ride from Bombay to Allahabad. He was sharing his first-class compartment with Rameshwar Swami, Jagadish, and Hari Sari. And even as the train pulled out of the station, Prabhupada was preaching. Rameshwar mentioned a radio show he had recently been on in California, where a Lutheran minister had said Krishna was a sex symbol because he had so many wives and gopis. Even taking it that Krishna is after sex, said Srila Prabhupada. Then if sex is bad, why are they after sex? He says that sex is not for God, Rameshwar replied. Srila Prabhupada was sitting on one side of the compartment and his disciples sat facing him. The loud rattling of the train cars and the rails made conversation sometimes difficult. If sex is not there in God, said Prabhupada, then how has it come? God created everything. So God did not create sex? Srila Prabhupada explained that sex exists both in the material world and in the spiritual. Material sex enjoyment being a perversion of the original, pure sex that exists in the Supreme being a perversion of the original pure sex that exists in the Supreme. Krishna's sexual enjoyment, therefore, is not at all like material sex. It is the exact opposite. In fact, inasmuch as the reality is the opposite, of its reflection. You do not understand how to face the opposing party, said Srila Prabhupada. He was in an animated, augmentated of mood, enthusiastic to show his disciples how to defeat the opposition. He had sometimes described his own spiritual master as Singha Guru, and they now saw him in a similar fighting spirit. The more opposition there will be, he said, the more we have to defend. Srila Prabhupada Rameshwar asked, should we be thinking in our minds that one day Krishna conscious movement will have to manage the cities and the nations of the world? Oh yes, Prabhupada replied. Rameshwar asked how the devotees could accomplish such a huge, ambitious project. The management would be simplified, Prabhupada explained, since the citizens would live a pure, natural life. Thus, the burdensome, sinful aspects of godless government would become unnecessary, and so many complex problems would be solved. He gave the example of self-sufficient agrarian communities where men earned their livelihood locally. But only by education and by experiencing the higher taste of Krishna consciousness pleasure, he said, could the masses become satisfied with simple living. Rameshwar asked if America would become Krishna conscious by a minority of Krishna conscious persons becoming powerful in government, while the masses remained as karmis. No, Prabhupada replied. You can introduce Krishna consciousness in such a way that they will become devotees. Suppose in big factories we shall introduce this prasadam distribution and chanting. They will immediately become devotees. Their hearts will be cleansed. Chaita darpana marjanam. But will it be like Russia, pursued Rameshwar, where there is only a small group of people who are in control? No, it is not like that. The quality of the people will be changed. So that means only when the whole mass of population becomes Krishna conscious, Rameshwar suggested, then there will be Krishna conscious government? No, Prabhupada corrected. You can have government when you are in minority, but the mass of people, on account of this quality, they have the example. Srila Prabhupada, they have to see the example. Yad charati shrestas. Where's our third canto? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 2nd Chapter, Text 21. Chapter titled Remembrance of Lord Krishna. Swayam tvasam yatisyastraya dishaha. This one's a little tricky, huh? Swayam tvasam yatisyastraya dishaha. Svayam tasham yatishayas triyadasha. Swarajya lakshmyapta samastakama. Swarajya lakshmyapta samastakama. Baling harad bichir lokapalai. Baling harad bichir lokapala. Kirita kodye ditapada pita. Kirita kodye ditapada pita. Please chant. Svayanta Shamyati Shayasya Disha. Swarajya Lakshmyapta Samastakama. Maling Haradvi Chiralokapala. Kirita Kodye Datapadapita. Svayanta Shamyati Shayasya Disha. Swarajya Lakshmyapta Samastakama. Baling Haradvi Chiralokapala. Kirita Kodye Datapadapita. Svayanta Shamyati Shayasya Disha. Swarajya Lakshmyapta Samastakama. Maling Haradvi Chiralokapala. Kirita Kodye Datapadapita. Anyone else? Swayam, himself, to, but, asamya, unique, atishaya, greater, Triyadisha, Lord of the three, Swaraja, independent supremacy, Lakshmi, fortune, Apta, achieved, Samastakama, all desires, Malim, worshipping paraphernalia, Haradbi, offered by, Chiraloka, Chiralokapalai, by the eternal maintainers of the order of creation, Kiritakoti, millions of helmets, Editapadapita, feet honored by prayers. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Lord Sri Krishna is the Lord of all kinds of threes and is independently supreme by achievement of all kinds of fortune. He is worshipped by the eternal maintainers of the creation, who offer him the paraphernalia of worship by touching their millions of helmets to his feet. Please repeat. Lord Sri Krishna is the Lord of all kinds of threes and is independently supreme by achievement of all kinds of fortune. He is worshipped by the eternal maintainers of the creation, who offer him the paraphernalia of worship by touching their millions of helmets to his feet. Purport. Lord Sri Krishna is so mild and merciful as described in the above verses, and yet he is the Lord of all kinds of threes. He is the supreme Lord of the three worlds, the three qualities of material nature, and the three Purushas, Karna Dakshayi, Garbha Dakshayi, and Shira Dakshayi Vishnu. There are innumerable universes, and in each and every universe there are different manifestations of Brahma, Vishnu, and Rudra. Besides that, there is the Seshamurti, who bears all the universes on his hoods, and Lord Krishna is the Lord of all of them. As the incarnation of Manu, he is the original source of all Manus in innumerable universes. Each universe has manifestations of 504,000 Manus. He is the Lord of the three principal potencies, namely Chit Shakti, Maya Shakti, and Tatastha Shakti. And he is the complete master of 6 kinds of fortune: wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. There is none who can excel him in any matter of enjoyment, and certainly there is no one greater than him, no one is equal to or greater than him. It is the duty of everyone, whoever and wherever one may be, to surrender completely unto him. It is not wonderful, therefore, that all the transcendental controllers surrender to him and make all offerings of worship. Om Jnana Tamrandasya Garanjana Shlakaya Chakshorn Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhai Degaram Yat Kipatamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Very interesting translation, this Chiralokapalai, by the eternal maintainers of the order of creation. In the material world, there are so many attempts to create some association, some society, some club. It's like this building that we're in was originally built by a group called the Odd Fellows Club. The Odd Fellows Club, which was an offshoot of the Masonic Lodge, another order. Groups of people coming together for some common interest. Sometimes social, sometimes spiritual. But there's a tendency to want to create some association. What's that saying? Birds of a feather flock together. Of course, we see there's great difference between such association and the association of the sages of Naimisharanya, who assembled to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam on the bank of a holy river, Ganges, Saraswati, whatever. And so that association is duplicated in every temple, in every city of the world, every day. Devotees are gathering to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the epitome of association, coming together to hear, glorify, and discuss the pastimes, attributes, paraphernalia of the Supreme Lord. All right? Nama Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddha Nitya Mukta Binatvam Nama Namino. And why? Why discourse about Krishna? People are speaking on so many mundane subject matters, but what is the result? Simply further entanglement in material affairs, material consciousness, material modes. But such association, as demonstrated by the sages who come together, this has the power to transform the situation. Just like Srila Prabhupada was traveling to Allahabad. Why should the devotees travel anywhere? The devotees can sit down and chant the holy name wherever they are. The holy name is, that's the verse, Nama Chintamani Krishna. Krishna is non-different from his name. But yet there's special potency infused in certain areas which attracts a certain class of men, the sages and the saints. And it is their presence which transforms those locations. It is said that when they go to such and such places, whether it's Allahabad or some other tirtha, the sinful actions of those who also attend are eradicated. They're absorbed by these saintly persons. So there is some motive. They're not going simply for getting purified by visiting the holy place. Many of them are going because they know that if I bathe in the Ganges at this time, all my sins will be washed away by dint of the presence of the sages. So there is some selfish purpose. But nevertheless, going to that situation is beneficial for all involved, regardless of the motive. So in the same way, when a person comes to the temple, he may have so many ideas why he's coming. Maybe he's coming just to visit the Govindas, to have lunch, but actually he's becoming purified. Just by coming into the temple, he's becoming purified. He smells the incense offered to the deities. This is why we put the incense in the front lobby. Anyone who comes in and smells the incense, he's purified. It has the same effect as taking prasadam. He is taking prasadam. Prasad doesn't just mean foodstuffs. So this is, the devotees have to have that consciousness, how to engage others in spiritual life. Everything that's happening in a temple is meant for spreading Krishna consciousness, for expanding the influence of Krishna consciousness. It's like this propaganda Prabhupada said. Now they have a different term for propaganda. They call it influencers. Influencers. People get paid by different enterprises to appear on things like Instagram and other Snapchat and TikTok and all these things. To do what? To show off their association with something. So this is nothing but pure propaganda. Trying to convince you to become, interested in something, or to become disinterested in something. It works both ways. Some people are saying, yes, do this. Some people are saying, no, saying, don't do this, don't do this. It's all propaganda. And it fits perfectly with the mind. Because what is the business of the mind? Simply accepting and rejecting. Accepting and rejecting. So the only thing that can prevent the burdensome influence of Maya on the living entity is contingent on his infusing his mind with Krishna consciousness, hearing the glories of the Lord, being able to conjure up within his mind the pastimes of Krishna, the association of the holy places where Krishna performed his pastimes, like Vrindavan, Mathura, or Navadvip, or Jagannath Puri. And so if one has at the ready such, you can say they're memories, whether from this life or from another life, then he is always protected, because he can see within his mind's eye the transcendental, beautiful form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pastimes performed in these Leela stans, places of pilgrimage. This is not some other stan. There are so many stans. Stan means place. Right? So there are what are the other stans? Pakistan. That is not a transcendental stan. But Leela stan. So we can go in our minds to Lilistan anytime without having to purchase a ticket. The only ticket is your sincere endeavor to chant the holy names and to follow in the footsteps of the acharyas. Mahajana yena gatak sapanta. So we see that Srila Prabhupada is demonstrating by example every second, in every word he speaks, in every circumstance, he's utilizing it for Krishna consciousness. And he's not utilizing it for his own benefit. He's expressing what needs to be said according to time and circumstances, because that is the specific quality of the spiritual master, of the pure, self-realized devotee. He knows how to dispel the darkness of ignorance from within the heart of a serious, sincere disciple. That is the specific quality. And he can take the devotee, the disciple, out of Maya. Of course, the devotee has to be sincere. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. One has to render service, and that service must be rendered favorably. The more that service is rendered favorably, the more advancement the disciple makes. Up to the point where he's struggling by artificially controlling his behavior, then the process will become slow. But as soon as he reaches that point where he wants to please the spiritual master by every activity, by every thought, word, and action, then he has reached that point at which Krishna will bestow upon him his mercy in such a way that the devotee will always be protected in every endeavor. He will be fearless. He will be fearless. You know, the materialists, they have that saying, which we have adopted, right? No fear. Now we pass out that Nrsinga sticker, very popular. No fear. And how? How do the devotees have no fear? Because they know that they are under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada said, why should I fear for anything? I am a servant of the Lord. Why should I fear for anything? I am the servant of, you see all these 504,000 Manus. They're bowing their heads to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that one prayer by Shani Dev, Saturn, to the Supreme Lord Nrsingadev. He was witnessing how innumerable Brahmas were coming before the Lord. And their helmets were bowing down before him and appeared to be like ghee lamps reflected. So many hundreds of thousands. Of course, there's more than hundreds of thousands of Brahmas. There's unlimited. Just as there are unlimited universes, there are unlimited Brahmas. And sometimes when we hear these pastimes, we think, how is it possible? Because with our material minds, everything is calculated according to some mundane chronology. People cannot accommodate that which is beyond their material senses. So they think, how is it that 5,000 years ago? So then they think, no, there couldn't have been, this book could not have been written 5,000 years ago, or spoken 5,000 years ago, or more. Nobody knew about any universe besides this one. And What to speak of this one, they knew hardly anything of that. Everyone's heard of the Dark Ages, right? Most of the world was in so-called Dark Ages. When you look at so-called advanced civilizations like the Egyptian civilization, their most famous book called the Book of the Dead. Not a very deep text, so to speak. And everything that's there is some reflection of the vestigial remnants of the Vedic civilization. They don't really understand anything. But yet, simultaneously existing, a few thousand miles away, is the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is filled with pure knowledge, original knowledge, about all the controllers of the universes and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But they were completely oblivious. And so therefore they minimized it, tried to discount it. How do they do that? By saying it's mythology, where Srila Prabhupada used to pronounce it mythology. Because every group has its own mythology. They're gods and goddesses. But they have no understanding. Yes, these tales are all some poor reflection of what had been previously passed down. Because what happened? Everyone knows that prior to Kali Yuga, everyone was Shrutidhara. Do you know what Shrutidhara means? Shrutidhara means Shruti means by hearing, and Dhara means to hold. So Shrutidhara means one who, having once heard something, he never forgets it. So this is not a photographic memory, this is a hearing memory. Once having heard, he never forgets. So oral tradition was the means of transmission from generation to generation. And what does that say? Why does it say, Evam parampara praptim imam rajasyo vidu? Right? What's the translation? Evam parampara praptim imam raj. This supreme science was thus understood in a chain of disciplic succession. But the saintly kings, this was understood by the saintly kings. But the science as it is appears to be lost. Gopal will find the exact translation in a second.
The supreme science was thus received through the chain of succession, and the saintly kings understood it. The saintly kings understood it in that way. But in the course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost.
So why was the succession broken? Because Kali Yuga. Because the oral tradition, at time of Kali Yuga, everything became reduced again by 25%. So they had the ability to retain knowledge which was orally transmitted. Orally and orally. Orally means spoken, and orally with an A means hearing. So they couldn't retain. So it was lost. Oh, Krishna, yada yada amasya glanir bhavati bharata. So Krishna comes to reestablish the principles of religion. But it's very difficult for an ordinary person, not versed in spiritual understanding, to appreciate when the Lord comes, how he comes, why he comes. It's like the Christians are waiting for the second coming. And there are some specific events, supposedly, which will precede that. And every once in a while they say, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen, it's going to happen. But they don't know. Whereas we see that from the past, all the advents, incarnations of the Lord are predicted according to the Shastras, because these things are like the changing of seasons. Right? So from Satyuga to Dwapara Yuga to Treta Yuga to Kali Yuga, these things have already happened. They're happening now here, they're happening in another universe simultaneously. Just slight differences in time and circumstance. So we know that we're in Kali Yuga. We know that we're 5,000 years into Kali Yuga. We know that there's 427,000 more years of Kali Yuga. And we know that we're in the golden age of Kali Yuga for 10,000 years, 9,500 of which are left. And we know that at the end of this Yuga, Kalki avatar comes. So everything is there, we know. These things will continue on and on. Of course, things will become quite degraded. But because once in a day of Brahma, we see that there's the specific advent of the golden avatar, we're very fortunate. Everyone, of course, wants to be fortunate. So we try to take this fortune and not keep it locked up, hidden away. We take this fortune and we want to spread it. We want to give it to others. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada emphasized that if you, based on his spiritual master's instruction, that books are the basis, and therefore we emphasize because Srila Prabhupada emphasized, because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta emphasized. And because we're following that instruction carefully, therefore the Krishna conscious movement continues. This is the potency of the order of the spiritual master. Yasya Devi Parabhaktir Yata Deve Tata Guru. One doesn't have to, but if one has implicit faith in the spiritual master and Krishna, then automatically everything is revealed, all knowledge, the Vedas. Right? Now, Krishna is saying this in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. We see it repeated frequently throughout and exemplified. That nice story about Baladev Vijayabhusan. You know, the Vaishnavas had no commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. And they were being criticized. Now just like this association here, what was it called? Jiraloka Palai, by the eternal orders of the maintainer of creation. We didn't have some specific commentary. So Baladev Vijayabhusan was requested that you please do this. But this was time-bound. This was not something that could wait years to be done. They needed it to be presented like next day. Not quite next day. But the place where this Baladev Vijayabhusan was staying, there was a hermitage called, what's the name of that hermitage? It's in the, just as you approach Jaipur, the city, Galta. It's called Galtaji. So there's an ancient, you go there and there are rock cells cut into the walls of this, I don't know what you want to call it, like a ravine. And when you approach this, you can feel the antiquity. You literally, the sense of going back in time is very present there. Since time immemorial, these sages are meditating in these mountains. Jaipur is surrounded by these hills. Right? And there's a very special Gomukh, And from that Gomukh, the Ganges water flows. Forceful. This is the middle of the desert and high up in the hills of Jaipur. Middle of the desert. And the water is just gushing out of this cliff face. And around that stream, someone has fashioned a marble stone Gomukh, cow's mouth, Gomukh. And the waterfall empties into this huge pool. So this is the setting, Galtaji, where Govinda, this commentary is called what? Govinda Bhasya. Why is it called Govinda Bhasya? Because Govinda appeared before Baladev Vijayabhushan and dictated this commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. So how did he appear? We know he didn't necessarily walk up in the mountains there, but Sarva Sichaham Riddhi Sani Vishtoma Taksmatir Ganamapoanam Cha. Supreme Lord is situated within the heart. And from him comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So to the pure devotee, Krishna can appear continuously, like Srila Prabhupada said, like closed circuit TV. But one has to be qualified. So within Baladev Vijayabhusan's heart, the Supreme Personality appeared personally and said, hey, I'll dictate, you compile. So this is the nature of transcendental literature. It is realized knowledge. It is coming directly from the Supreme Lord. Sometimes through the mouths of his devotees, like Vyasadeva, sometimes from himself directly, like Bhagavad Gita. But the ordinary person cannot grasp this initially. But he can be impacted by the words of the pure devotee, as we all were at one point or another, where Srila Prabhupada's words cut through the darkness of ignorance. Om Jnana Tamrandasya Gananjana Shalakaya. Cut through the darkness of ignorance and affected us to the extent necessary for us to momentarily have some clarity where we could appreciate the pure devotee. And that moment of clarity is a gift from God. By some agyata sukriti. You got prasadam from a devotee, you gave a donation to a devotee in this life or a previous life. You did something that qualified you. There's another reason why we have temples. So that anyone can come in and perform some service. Because that service, the definition of that service is agyata sukriti, because they don't necessarily understand what the benefit is. It's unknown pious activity. Unknown because they don't know it. We know it. That's why we maintain the temple. People come in and they sweep the floor. They do something. And they get the opportunity to get that moment of clarity. It's like winning the lottery, but they don't know it. People think, oh, let me pay so much money. I'll win the lottery. I'll become rich. But anyone who walks in the door has won the lottery of life. He spun that wheel and it landed on the jackpot. He just doesn't know it. Whatever he picks up, whatever he does from that point on is to his positive, everlasting. Nehapikramanasasti prativayanavidite. No loss or diminution, and a little advancement saves one from the greatest fear. So maybe we should have a special, every time someone walks through the door, there should be lights flashing. Say, you've won. You've won the jackpot. They have it on the TV shows, right? All the lights start blinking, you hear the special music, you know, the MC comes out and says, pulls back the curtain and says, just see what you've won. Bhagavad Gita as it is, science of self-realization. The perfection of yoga. Beyond birth and death, you've won. So in this way we have our service to help us and help everyone we come in contact with, as long as we have the attitude of the messenger. Right? Messenger of God, just like Prabhupada wrote that, the message of Godhead. Right? Very special essay. The message of Godhead. And who is Srila Prabhupada? He is the messenger. He is the messenger. In India, when I was serving there, they have, they have different conveyances. So one motorcycle was called Rajdut. Rajdut means king's messenger. And we thought it was kind of humorous because this was a really funky motorcycle, not very sophisticated. I mean, and to the Western, technology, it's just it's probably 50 technology. Actually, everything in India at that time was all 50-year-old technology, repurposed. But it was there, it worked, but it was just funny because here's this dinky little motorcycle, and it's called the King's, so they give it a name like the King's Messenger, It's like, whatever. It's like naming a bicycle, like a Rolls Royce or something, It's like, give it a big name, but it's nothing. Rajdut. So, but here we see that the real messenger of Godhead, the pure devotee, he is exalted. He is worshipped by the demigods, by the denizens of heaven. He's worshipped by everyone because of his position as an intimate servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna says, there is no one more dear to me. He didn't have to say that. He could have just left it unsaid and let you figure it out on your own. But no, he wanted it known. So Krishna's making himself available to be known by those who are sincere. Those who are sincere. It's a very simple concept, but difficult for those who are envious, right? Krishna says, Moga samoga karmana moga jnana vicetasa. He's telling us very clearly that your knowledge will be stolen by illusion. He's not saying that you individually, but he's telling us that this is what happens. These are the examples. Don't be like this. Don't be like the mudhas, avajananti ma mudha. Don't be like those persons who don't understand Krishna, who don't try to understand Krishna, who reject Krishna. Don't. There's no profit. Devotees are constantly devoted and worshiping Krishna. That's the definition. So that is why we have a temple, just to be trained in that regard. There should not be an idle moment. Everything done here should be done continuously. Sometimes the devotees are thinking, I have a little free time. Yeah. Free time in a temple means what? To hear and chant about Krishna. I have a few minutes where I'm not busily engaged in some other prescribed activity. Let me open up Srimad Bhagavatam and read. Let me continue on the path of spiritual life, without any interruption. Don't take it as an opportunity that now I should do something other than Krishna consciousness. That other is Maya. So be careful. Yeyatamam prapadente tam satava bhajamyaham. As you surrender unto me, I will reward you accordingly. It couldn't be any clearer than that. Couldn't be any clearer. And what else does he say? Everyone is under my control in any, right? We're all under Krishna's control, but some of us are in Maya and some of us are in Krishna. So that's the key, to be in Krishna, not to be in Maya. So we'll read the text again. Lord Sri Krishna is the Lord of all kinds of threes, by achievement of all kinds of fortune. He is worshipped by the eternal maintainers of the creation, who offer him the paraphernalia of worship by touching their millions of helmets to his feet. Any questions, comments? Mr. Ram Roy.
The reason that the commentary had to be produced immediately because the Smarta Brahmins were challenging the Vaishnavas' right to worship Radha Govinda in Jaipur. It's like a very dire situation.
Who can imagine? And Radha Govinda, of course, are not just any ordinary deities. Any other questions, comments? Thank you for that. Sashi. Loud.
You were mentioning favorable service. I was wondering if favorable means like the right way to do the service, like with like the regulated principles, like that's favorable. Like you were talking about the favorable attitude. So if you don't have a favorable attitude towards the service, is it considered not favorable in that way?
Well, good question. Having a favorable attitude is the definition of devotional service. I mean, yeah, there's service and then there's devotional service. So in the beginning, for those who are unfamiliar, it has that benefit, that agyata sukriti. But for one who is trying to enter into the higher stages of spiritual life, then that service has to be on a realized platform, which indicates that that one understands sambandha, abhideya, and prayojan. And we don't expect that someone walking in the door understands these things. But unless one understands those things, then he cannot make advancement in spiritual life. He has to be fully, how can you say, situated. It's like it says that without the mode of goodness, knowledge cannot take place. Yeah? You can have knowledge in the material world, so many mundane subject matters, but that is not real knowledge. Real knowledge means to understand the difference between spirit and matter. So that knowledge can only be possible when one is in the mode of goodness, and more specifically in the mode of pure goodness, Vishuddha Vasudeva conscious. But that one is practicing in the temple under the guidance of the spiritual master. He is given that concession, that he's in that mode. Whether he takes advantage of it or not, that's up to him. Just like, you can get the concession. They gave in the Lilamrita, there was no seats left in the train. But Prabhupada knew someone. And so they put an extra car in the train. Right? Train usually has so many cars for first class, second class, third class, no class, general passenger. But because Prabhupada knew someone, they put an extra whole car on the train. So that is us in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, traveling with Srila Prabhupada in a special car, on those parallel tracks back to Godhead. So we want to stay in that car. So the ticket for that car is favorable devotional service, attitude and execution, both. And that's one is reflected of the other. If you have a favorable attitude, you will not be doing a bad job, a quick, hasty, job just to be able to say, yeah, I did the pots. What did you do to the pots? I threw them in the corner. No, you didn't do the pots. Do the pots means to clean the pot inside and outside equally. That was the definition I was taught. That the inside of the pot and the outside of the pot are the same. You don't just wash the inside. If the outside doesn't shine as much as the inside, then you haven't done it. It's not clean. Cheta Darpana Marjanam. We're attempting to cleanse the heart. And so that's not done halfway. You can do it halfway, but you'll get halfway result. Right? Even in the material world, they don't say. They say, don't do the job halfway. Of course, they use a different term, but it's the same connotation. Don't do it halfway. No. A job worth doing. How many parents have said that to their kids? I can't. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that, I would have been a millionaire. If a job is worth doing, it's worth doing right. It's a cliche, but it's an axiomatic truth. Going back to the Vedic teachings, except that they don't know that. But it is a fact. It is a fact. Okay? Any other questions, comments, concerns before our beautiful Lordship, Shri Shri Radha Govinda? Was that okay, Sashi? Was that okay? Yes, Prabhu, but it has to be loud because I'm like.
So at the beginning you talked about sex life and a reflection of spiritual. So what's the real sex life? What's an example of what that's supposed to be?
An example is what's described in the Bhagavad Gita. It says, I am sex life not devoid of religious principles. So one has to know what the religious principles are. The religious principles means that sex life is for procreation. And it is done with one's wife only. And it is done only at the time when the woman can become pregnant, which means it's restricted to once or twice in a month. And then once the woman is pregnant, it's forbidden until 6 months after the birth of the child. So that is the definition according to the Shastras.
In spiritual world, is there any procreation?
You have to speak really loud.
In the spiritual world, I don't think there's any procreation, right?
No, in the spiritual world, there's no sex life as we know it. It is not a physical intercourse in the spiritual world. There is no need. But we tend to impose our material conceptions on spiritual. Therefore, that's why sometimes we think that God is just a man. So what man can create. And so Krishna's internal potency, of course, that's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it goes considerably into the depth of Krishna's internal potency, Ladini Shakti. So that's why it is considered to be the postgraduate study. And if one has read Srimad Bhagavatam and read all the other supporting literatures, Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, then when he progresses to Chaitanya Charitamrita, he will have a solid foundation to understand things in a spiritual context, not in a material context. So that was a very good question. Thank you for asking. Any other questions? Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.